Hello, everyone. Welcome. I think a few people are still probably filtering into the room. My name is Dr. Aaron Johnston. I'm the Associate Dean for Distributed Learning and Rural Initiatives at the University of Calgary. And I'd like to welcome you all to our event tonight. We think it's going to be a really exciting night. It's called How Do I Get There? A conversation with University of Calgary medical students. The idea for this presentation is a collaborative idea between the University of Calgary Medical School and the Rural Health Professionals Action Plan. And you'll get to meet a few people tonight. I'll talk to you a little bit about rural health. Dr. Remo Panaccione, who is our Dean for Admissions, will talk to you about the path into medical school. And you'll have an opportunity to hear from several medical students about how they have, how their career trajectory has gone so far, how they got to where they're going. Before we start tonight, I want to do a few things. The first is a territorial land acknowledgement. I know we're a virtual group tonight, so we may be in different places and on different traditional lands, but right now I'm in Calgary, which is the traditional territory of the people of the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. That includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, including the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai First Nations, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation, the Stoney Nakoda, which includes the Chiniki, the Bearspaw, and the Wesley First Nation. And the city of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta Region Number 3. The land you're on might be different. You might be calling in from Treaty 6 territory or in the northern half of our province or somewhere else, but just a reflection on the land that we're all sitting on tonight. A little bit of Zoom etiquette. I assume with all the online school you guys have gone through that you're all Zoom experts by now. People did send in questions in advance, but we'll have lots of time for question and answer at the end. To use question and answer, we'll primarily be using the chat function. So the chat function can be opened by clicking on chat at the bottom of your screen. You can also use the participants menu to open it up and if you have technical issues, send a message directly to DLRI University of Calgary, who's the host, and we'll try to resolve that for you. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. And if there's something that we can answer in the chat, we may answer some of these questions in the chat, but we may also bring them forward to the question and answer period to give them a great answer. So that's me, Dr. Aaron Johnston. I grew up as a rural kid in Ontario. I didn't know I wanted to be a doctor right out of high school. I thought I'd be a biology PhD and a researcher, but eventually found my way into medicine and eventually found my way to Calgary. Rural health is really important to me. You know, when I grew up, our rural family doctor was the only doctor I knew. He was a great doctor. He did house calls, took care of us when we were in the hospital, and having that kind of level of care close to home was important for me and my family. And so rural healthcare has always been an important theme to me through my career. And hopefully it'll be an important theme to some of you too. One of the things about rural healthcare is that we need to attract people who have a rural background, who know what it's like to live and be a part of a rural community, and bring those ideas into medical school. So we're looking forward to talking to you, and we're hoping to inspire some of you tonight to carry forward with your plans of becoming physicians. Next slide, please. I'm going to turn it over to Colleen Lindholm, who's the Community Engagement and Development Specialist with RHPAP. RHPAP stands for the Rural Health Professionals Action Plan. Colleen?
Yeah, thanks so much, Sharon. And just a big thank you to everyone who's joining us tonight. And a special shout out to the folks at UofC here who have helped put this event together. So I'm not going to take up too much of your time because I know that we have some really important presenters and that you want to listen to. But I just thought I'd let you know a little bit about RPAP. So who is RPAP? We are celebrating our 30th birthday this year. So we have been around for a little while. And our vision is for rural Alberta and Albertan communities to have the appropriate health workforce to effectively deliver the health services that they need to thrive. So in short, we work with rural communities across the province, supporting them with tools and resources to attract and retain health professionals. We also work with health professionals, offering various education, professional development opportunities for them to increase their existing skills. Next slide, please. So we have a team of rural community consultants who work and live across rural Alberta, and we work with about over 150 communities. And within those communities, we have about 45 attraction and retention committees. And so some of the work that they do, some of it may look like welcoming and integrating a new physician and their family into the community. It could also look like a community-wide appreciation event for your local healthcare professionals. Some committees have also put together a post-secondary skills weekend where medical, nursing, and other university and college students will come to the community for a weekend, experiencing what it would be like to work, live, and play there. These are really popular events. Another really popular event, and this is what will be more applicable to you folks, is our Rural High School Skills Days. This is a full day experience where students like yourself experience hands-on medical skills such as suturing pig feet and starting an IV line into fake arms and some really fun activities. And then they listen to your local healthcare professionals who really talk about and share their stories of how they got to where they are and why they work, live, and play in a rural community. So while we know that these events are not able to happen right now due to COVID, we do anticipate they will happen again at some point. But in the meantime, we are really pleased to be offering this Let's Go Rural event such as tonight. So do keep your eyes open, and I encourage you to follow RPAP on the various social media outlets. And we're on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. And once there's lots of things that we can offer to high school students, such as our high school skills days. So one more thing, I will be emailing all of you an evaluation after the event is over tonight. We really appreciate you taking a few minutes to fill it out so we know how to plan for future events like this. Plus, you can enter for a draw. There's going to be 2 $50 Visa gift cards. And also in that survey will be an opportunity for you to leave your email address with us if you would like to hear more about our future events and even being connected to the Attraction and Retention Committee in your area. I know that they would love to connect with high school students. So I think that's it from me, and thank you again for joining us tonight, and back over to you, Aaron.
Thanks so much, Colleen. So now there's a bit of the presentation that I'm sure you're all really eager to hear. Dr. Remo Panaccione is the assistant dean who's responsible for admissions to the medical school, and he's going to talk a little bit about how people pursue a medical career and how they get into medical school. I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Panaccione.
Thanks, Aaron, and welcome everybody. This is one of the more exciting things that we do in the Office of MD Admissions, to really do outreach and sort of bust some myths with respect to how to get into medical school. Aaron can probably attest to this. When we got into medical school, it was all about who had the highest grades and who wrote had the highest score on standardized tests. But over the time, we've really come to recognize that being an effective physician goes well beyond your academic performance. And as Aaron has sort of alluded to, one of the important things is to be able to train individuals who either have certain passions and or have ties to certain communities that traditionally may be underrepresented. And certainly rural medicine in general is one of those areas that is underrepresented. And as I go through here, I'll highlight some of the things that we believe are important. All over the country, there have been programs to try to recruit or retain individual physicians in rural communities. And the number one thing to do is to actually get people who grew up in those rural communities, who have ties to those communities, trained, excited about medicine, and willing to go back to where their roots were. So next slide. So I'll give you sort of a guide on what we do and some insight in preparing for medical school. It's unfortunate that, you know, many individuals still sort of subscribe to those myths that you have to be the top of your class to think about a career in medicine. And so the path, as some of the medical students may tell you, is very, very different for individual students. And in addition to that, because we're looking for things beyond marks or academic performance, it's important to start thinking about the things that you may be interested in and what defines you as an individual student or person, and get involved in some activities that would demonstrate to an admissions committee what your passions are, and demonstrate some of the things that we're looking for, we believe are important for applicants coming into the medical school. So next slide. So I'm going to talk about sort of who gets accepted and how to get there. And then Erin is going to do an interlude on sort of the rural connection here. So next slide. So getting in. So one of the things I'm not going to, I won't sort of tell you is that it's easy. It's a very, very competitive process. So for example, last year we received 1,700 applications. This year we received over 2,000 applications. Out of those applications, anywhere between 1,500 will go to a formal review of the files, and we take a very holistic view at this. So it's not the doctors only that are reviewing the files. We have certainly physicians and members of our faculty review the files. We have students and residents review files. We have members of the allied healthcare professionals, so people that you'd be working with, so nurses, physiotherapists, psychologists, occupational therapists, and we also have members of the public. So those are like 4 different sort of groups that will be reviewing the file, and each one of those, when they review your file, those scores count equally. So again, we want different lenses on how individuals from different scopes of society would look at an application. Out of that, we interview about 576 individuals. We are increasing that at over 600 this year. And each year we accept anywhere between 150 to 155 students into the first year. Next slide. As far as you know, who's accepted, this just gives you an idea of the demographics. So over time, and this changed probably about 25 years ago when I was going through medical school, there was this switch in sort of the gender distribution. So anywhere across Canada, there's predominance of females over males. You can see last year it was 64% female, 36% males. The average age sits around 24 or 25. So we have individual students who get in after a few years of an undergrad degree or just completing an undergrad degree. And then we have many, many individuals who decide to come back to medicine after pursuing a different career. And that doesn't necessarily mean more schools, but they're out schooling, but they're out in the workforce. One of the important things on this slide is the overall GPA of the students. So just to give you an idea of what this translates into, if these numbers translate into, if you're not used to looking at GPA, this GPA again is sort of the mean GPA, and it's about an A-, which means that yes, we have our A+ students, but we also have students who have a B or a B+. In fact, to be eligible to apply to the school, as an Albertan, you need a GPA of 3.2, and a 3.2 GPA translates into roughly a B average. As you can see, most people finish an undergrad degree, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then about a quarter of a quarter of applicants will have a graduate degree. The most important thing is that that we get asked is, oh, what should I do after high school and to get myself ready for medical school? Do I have to do sciences? I really don't like science that much. I didn't do well in science maybe in high school. It doesn't matter what undergraduate degree you do. We look at all degrees equally. And so we have individuals who come into who are successful getting into medical school, who do background degrees in music, in arts, in engineering. They come from a nursing background. Certainly, unless you've had this discussion before, there's this move for individuals to want to do science in their undergraduate degree. And I'll touch on that a little bit more from a counseling perspective. Next slide. So over the last, I'd say, decade, and this started with my predecessor, Dr. Ian Walker, who's a colleague of Dr. Johnson, who is really a champion of trying to diversify not only the applicants, but those individuals who get into the medical school. And we've built on that. And so we look for individuals, as I'll show you, that come from traditionally underrepresented backgrounds. And the way we've gone about doing this is by, again, having a more holistic review and looking for specific characteristics that are usually manifested in underrepresented groups, which again, I'll go over. It's important to sort of be yourself, right? And what I always tell the file reviewers is, when you read a file, you want to be sure that you know who that individual person is. Not every applicant can't be everything to every characteristic that we want. So we're looking for strengths and passions that individuals may have. One of the things that we introduced this year to complement what we've been doing for several years is a Black applicant admissions process. So we know that historically applicants of a Black background have been underrepresented in the applicant pool, and as well as the students that we let into medical school. So this is a separate process where individuals, similar to individuals who come from rural backgrounds, you can self-identify to the file reviewers that you have this background. It doesn't really give you, it doesn't mean that the bar is lower or we change what we're looking for. It just gives the context of the background of these individuals. And similar to our Indigenous applicants, all Indigenous applicants are considered Albertans, and as they were the first people of this country, and they're allowed to self-identify as well, and we have a separate application process for those individuals. Next. Oh, so a couple of things. I'm going to assume that most of you are Canadians or permanent residents. You need to be a Canadian or permanent resident to apply to the University of Calgary. So we don't accept individual international students. Alberta residents like you, as I said, you need a minimum GPA of 3.2 and in at least 2 full-time years of undergraduate work. When we calculate your GPA, if you've done 3 or more, or you're going into your final degree, we actually let you drop your lowest year. So it doesn't mean, we know that there's individuals who may transition into university, for example, and that first year in university is very different than high school, and their GPA may drop. So we give you 1 free year of GPA as long as you've done 3 or more. We make it a little more difficult for individuals who are non-Albertans to apply. The GPA standard there is a 3.8, which is just over an A-. And because we know that a lot of individuals who apply from out of the province are more likely to stay in their province than accept an offer from the University of Calgary. So we're looking for the bar's a little higher. There is a standardized test. It's called the MCAT, or the Medical College Admission Test. It's a monster of a test. It lasts about 8 hours, tests a variety of things that are essentially based in science. There's chemistry, physics, and biology there, but there's also societal principles, psychology, and what we measure, which we think is the most important thing, is a section called critical analytic and reasoning skills, which is, how do you think on the fly and digest information? We also ask for 3 references along with your application. So you have a lot of time to start thinking about who knows you best. And, 4 or 5 or 6 years from now, when you're thinking about applying, who can speak to you as a person and the things that you've done for most of you in your very young life. Next slide. So Aaron, I think I'm going to turn this back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Remo. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the rural connection at the medical school. My office at the medical school is called Distributed Learning and Rural Initiatives, and what we handle is events like this, trying to connect with potential rural students. But we also handle all of the rotations and experiences that medical students can have during the course of their training, either as medical students or as residents. Residency is that piece that comes after medical school where you're a doctor, but you're still training in a specific area of medicine, like family medicine, general surgery, internal medicine, gastroenterology. And all of those experiences, there's optional experiences that can happen that occur outside of the city and occur in rural areas. One of our favorite things to talk about is our UCLIC program. UCLIC is the University of Calgary Longitudinal Integrated Clerkship. And the way medical school works, some of you may know this, is that the first portion of medical school has a lot of classroom, or this year online-based learning, and some skills development around clinical skills. How do you talk to a patient? How do you examine a patient? And how do you think about what's going on with the patient? And the second half of medical school is all about working in the clinical environment, in the hospital or in physicians' offices, to get a hands-on learning experience that helps you to not only gain those skills, but to decide what area of medicine do I want to pursue as my career. The UCLIC program, the University of Calgary Longitudinal Integrated Clerkship, allows that clinical experience to occur mainly in a rural community in Alberta. And we have about 13 different partner communities that students go to, and they live for about 8 months in those communities and have a really broad exposure with generalist family doctors in those communities, and get a real sense of what rural life and rural medicine is all about. For some students, it's an urban student going out to a rural community, maybe for the first time to live there. And for other students, it's a rural student who's going maybe even home to their home community to live and work for that portion of their training. All medical students do get to have rural experiences, and those experiences range from the short, an afternoon of shadowing a rural physician, to a block of rural family medicine that occurs during the clerkship, to rotations during the pre-clerkship time where you get to go to the city, to, like I said, the UCLIC experience, which is sort of the Cadillac rural experience at the medical school. Next slide, please. So how much learning are we talking about? University of Calgary students and residents do a lot of rural learning, and we send lots of learners out every year. These are some statistics from our most recent year. So 562 rural learners for a total of over 4,000 weeks, and going to 50 different communities in Alberta. So a lot of variety there. And when we're talking about, I mentioned some of those experiences that add up to that. So those are those preclinical experiences where you go and spend a day with a rural doctor. Those are rotations during the clerkship, and those are even long clerkship blocks, or the whole clerkship sometimes. There's also opportunities for what we call remote experiences. So those are communities that are more than 300 kilometers from any kind of major urban center. So some communities in Northern Alberta and communities in the Arctic are communities where we send people as well for some highly specialized experiences. And those are great experiences that are often amazing for the students and kind of stay with them for a lifetime. Next slide, please. While we're talking about rural opportunities, I did want to take the opportunity to mention this, the Pathways to Medicine program. The Pathways to Medicine program is a scholarship-based program that people can apply for after they're accepted to the University of Calgary. And it's designed to help people from groups who don't traditionally go into medicine to help them get on a path that brings them to medical school. So it's specifically designed for students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds and targets students with Indigenous ancestry from rural communities or from other underrepresented groups. It's a program. There are 5 of these scholarships per year. But if you know you're interested in medicine, it is a scholarship worth pursuing because it's a really supported program. There's some money associated with it to help people with costs around tuition and deferring some of the costs around the examinations like the MCAT that get you into medical school. And probably more importantly, it allows people as an undergraduate student to start to build those connections and to have shadowing and clinical experiences even over the course of their undergrad training. So if you do decide to come to the University of Calgary and you're from a rural background and you think that this might apply to you, please think about looking it up and seeing if it's something of interest to you. And you can be, like Dr. Panaccione was saying, you can be in any undergraduate program and be a Pathways to Medicine scholar. So keep it in mind, please. Next slide. Back to you, Remo.
Yeah, so going back to transitioning from high school to university, especially if you're on this call, you're probably starting to think about, well, what am I going to do as an undergrad? And as I already alluded to, it's not all about science. One of the most important things that we counsel individuals on when they're in high school is pick something you love. There's a couple of reasons that you should do that. Number one is if you really like something, you're more likely to get better grades in it, right? Instead of doing something that you think is just going to get you to medical school. The other thing is that all education is important, but if you think about it, if you didn't get into medicine, will that experience in your undergrad sort of be a launching pad to some different career that you would enjoy other than medicine, and or will you use it for more education? So always think about, these are the things that I really like. This is what I love. This is what I love to do. As we said, we take individuals from a variety of different programs. And so you should start early and think about what the different programs are offered at the university that you may be interested in. And you can sort of flip things around. So perhaps you love music and then you're going to take electives in science to get you ready for medical school and or for writing the MCAT that I'll talk about. Next slide. Now, I just said, take anything you want. We do have a sort of list of recommended courses here. And the reason that we have recommended courses, again, it doesn't mean you need to take these, one is to give you a foundation in medical sciences. Perhaps the students can give you a little bit of background on this, but depending on the school that you go to, the way they teach medicine is very different. Some are very traditional, where they have certain courses, again, in anatomy and physiology, and they'll give you biochemistry and pharmacology again. Others are sort of integrated programs, and the University of Calgary is one of those where it's really based on systems. And so everything is taught sort of together around a system, both sort of what we call the physiology, pharmacology, and the clinical aspects of it. And certainly if you have a little bit of background in that, that makes that transition to medical school easier. Other courses that we recommend are courses that sort of give you a flavor in the social and behavioral sciences. And this is because one of the most important things as a physician is really to understand the patient's lived experiences. So different patients will have different lived experiences with similar diseases. And that sometimes comes down to sort of their background, anthropology, et cetera. And then, especially if you were interested in more academic medicine, getting an early start on things that may help you develop academic skills like statistics or scientific writing is also useful. Next slide. So we also appreciate work experience. In fact, I usually sort of, when we look at files and we see that, there's an individual who's never had any work experience, it sort of makes us scratch our head on what these individuals were doing. So we believe that work experience, regardless of how big or small it is valuable. It teaches you sort of teamwork, how to get along with other individuals, different roles that you may play in a group setting. And it really doesn't matter what that work experience is. It doesn't need to be some, high level sort of job that you're working sort of as the page to the Prime Minister. We have many of our applicants who talk favorably about all of what they learned from their first job at, for example, at McDonald's. The meat of your application is something that we call a top 10. What this really is a biographical sketch. It's your opportunity to pick 10 things in your life, and that means your entire life. It could have been when you're young, it could have been more recent, that really had an impact on who you are and defines you. And the one thing that I want to impart on this when we talk about the top 10, again, it's about the attributes that the top 10 tell us about you, not the actual entry. So the example that we always use is, we have Olympians who, have won gold medals who apply to medical school. And then we have individuals who immigrated to Canada as a youngster and had to learn English as a second language, and they may have come from a lower socioeconomic status. And so those are two different, in society, those are two individuals, right? Different individuals. This one is, the Olympian is somebody you see on TV and is glorified. And then, the other individual may have had struggles, but the attributes for them to actually succeed, determination, keeping their eye on a goal, et cetera, are exactly the same. Like, the attributes are what we're looking for. So it's not about what you have done, but why you've done it and how you've been able to do it. So it's and with respect to our applicants from rural communities, that in itself, growing up in a rural community, is very, very, very important, because it we believe teaches a lot of valuable lessons. Next slide. So if you want to start getting ready to apply to medical school, what are the things that we actually look at? So this is outlining sort of the whole file review process. And not only did I show you that the GPA it doesn't have to be super, super high, but you can see that it only counts for 20% of the whole file review. Then that standardized test, the MCAT, that particular portion called the CAR section, which is the critical, analytic, and reasoning score, is 10%. We then look at your whole file as far as what you did, in your undergrad, what kind of degree you did, what you did for your electives, and give you a score for global assessment of academic merit. And then, because we do value curiosity and scholarly activity and research, that counts for 10% as well. It doesn't mean you need to do research to get into medical school. Intellectual curiosity could be, over a summer, I learned to rebuild the engine in a car that I built. It could be, I learned, I took woodworking as a hobby and I built, a sort of chest of drawers. It's really doing something that sort of shows intellectual curiosity above and beyond just going to school. Now, more importantly, as you can see, half of what we look at are what we call non-cognitive attributes. And these are highlighted often within that top 10 that I just spoke about. So we look for communication skills, interpersonal skills and collaboration, maturity, insight, and resiliency, commitment to communities and advocacy on behalf of others, and evidence of organizational management and leadership skills. And these all count for 10% as well. So, you're probably at a stage where you're thinking, okay, so what have I done so far to demonstrate some of these things? And it may be, for most of you, it may be that you haven't done a lot of things in these different areas. So these are areas that you might want to start thinking about as you get into your senior years of high school. Have you done some volunteering, right? Do you tutor? Those are things that you can still do when you're young, which will forward your application when it comes time to apply. Next slide. On top of the Pathways to Medicine program that Aaron had described, we have what's called an alternative admissions process. And what the alternative admissions process is it's an opportunity for our file reviewers, and remember we have 4 of those for each applicant, to just to pick out individual applicants who have something special in their file. And we believe that will contribute to the societal mission of the University of Calgary and the Cummings School of Medicine. And so this includes individuals who have a strong connection to the Aboriginal community, traditionally underrepresented groups, which includes those from remote or rural communities, future clinician scientists, proven exceptional leaders, exceptional commitments to the betterment of societies, and a strong connection to the Black community. The way this works is, regardless of your total score, if 2 of your file reviewers flag you, and that means positively, for this alternative admissions process, you're automatically guaranteed an interview. So we put a lot of trust in our file reviewers, and in addition, what is relevant to you guys is the fact that we, in this process, identifying those individuals that come from remote and rural communities is something that we want to do and want to bring those individuals to the interview process. Next slide. So with that, I'm going to thank you. I'll stay on as there might be additional questions, and I'll turn it to Aaron. Aaron, we're going to probably answer the questions towards the end, or do you want?
Yeah, I think, maybe you could answer there's a question about medical school requirements, what courses are required. And it seems like there's a question, I'm going to read into it and ask about flexibility, because different schools have different course requirements. How do people manage that? Maybe you could answer that question, and then we'll pull that other question forward to the end.
Yeah. So again, I guess I'll reiterate and say that we don't have any prerequisites at the University of Calgary. So you don't have to. It's not like you're going to be missing a specific course. Now, that being said, most individuals who are interested in medicine do apply pretty broadly, and other schools may have prerequisites. So you're going to have to do your homework with respect to that. So, the one thing I don't want you to be left with is, well, Dr. Panaccione said I can take any course I want. Now I can't apply to the University of British Columbia. So what I was talking about is specific to the University of Calgary. And then Sorry, Aaron, that second question, aside from what courses to take, was...
No, I think that answered it in terms of other schools do have different requirements. And so I do think that if you're interested in medicine, you have to be a savvy shopper and thinking a step ahead, right? And so even though you're not in undergraduate studies yet, every medical school will have on their website a list of all their requirements. And if you were thinking that you were going to apply to schools in Western Canada, it would be a good idea to look at the requirements from the University of Saskatchewan, the University of Alberta. We're talking about the University of Calgary and the University of British Columbia. And when you're thinking about an undergraduate program, making sure that that program would have the flexibility to get you where you think you need to be in terms of gaining those courses so that you could apply that broadly. Next slide, please. So next up, now we'll hear from some people a little closer to your stage of education. First is Chelsea Barlow. Chelsea is one of the medical students at the University of Calgary and has kindly agreed to be here with us this evening. So over to you, Chelsea.
Great, thanks, Dr. Johnson. So hi, yeah, I'm really excited to be here and to talk to all of you. Like, you're on such an amazing journey and you're right at the start. So I don't know, I'm just so happy for all the, I guess, opportunities you have coming. So yeah, maybe I'll talk a little bit about kind of like where I came from. So I grew up in a rural community. Maybe you've heard of Vermilion. And I grew up on a farm. So my dad, he's still farming with my grandpa, and they are mostly cows and grain farming. But yeah, farming wasn't for me. So I didn't actually know right out of high school, just like Dr. Johnson, that I wanted to be a doctor. And I actually don't think I had the confidence at that time to pursue that path. So I'm so glad I'm here and I love it, but a little bit more of that. So probably like a lot of you, I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I knew I really liked healthcare. So I thought, you know what, nursing's for me, I'm gonna go for nursing. And because I'll have a job afterwards and I can help people and I'll learn so much. So I actually went to Grant MacEwan for a year and found out nursing just wasn't my thing. I'm not sure really what it was because I loved the physiology, the anatomy. I think it just kind of boils down to I was just kind of lost and I didn't know what I wanted to do. So thankfully I could still stay at Grant MacEwan at the time, and I decided to go for a Bachelor of Science and just kind of try some courses. And so I eventually majored in psychology and minored in biology because just like we were talking before in some of the slides that I chose some things that I was interested in and that I liked. And I got good grades in them, but there again, I still didn't really know what I wanted to do. But thankfully, I shadowed a couple of like allied health professionals. So I shadowed some physios, occupational therapists, and I eventually decided that physiotherapy was for me. So I applied to physiotherapy and I got into the U of A. Yeah, so I have my master's in physio, and then I went there and then I graduated, and then I worked for as a physio for 3 years in Edmonton. And throughout that time, I just decided, like, you know what, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to try for medicine and see what happens. Just because there was always that feeling like, I want to know more. I need to know more. I want to advocate for my patients more. Yeah, so I actually didn't take like biochemistry or organic chemistry, physics in my undergrad. So I had to really study my butt off and learn those things to write the MCAT, which was very hard. So I would highly recommend probably taking an organic chemistry class in your undergrad, but you don't have to. So if you really don't want to, you don't have to. Yeah, so there are lots of options. It's like I'm from a really non-traditional background when it comes to applying to medical school, but I think the University of Calgary just really fit in with like my values and what I was looking for in a medical school. yeah, so I'm super happy it worked out. I just wrote a few things down that I wanted to make sure that I told you guys, so I don't forget. Let me see here. Yeah, like in terms of the top 10, I love that in the University of Calgary application process, because it really let me show like what I'm all about. And then I knew that, like, you know, if I wasn't the right fit for the school and it didn't work out, then just wasn't meant to be, right? But it did. And yeah, it let me kind of highlight what was important to me outside of academics. So like, I like volunteering with animals. So like I was a squirrel nanny and I put that in there. I have some family history in terms of like growing up with parents who have addictions. So I included that in there. And then also highlighting, if you put those things in your application, say like, what did I learn from it? How did I grow? And how can I use this to help the communities and my patients in the future? So if you're going through those kind of things, if it makes you more mature and you are able to help people with it, I think that might be something you could think about putting in your application. But yeah, so that's kind of about me. And now I'm in my first year at the UofC. I'm a Tanuki, or not a Tanuki, I was supposed to be a Tanuki. I'm an echidna, because actually the day that I got my acceptance letter to the UofC, I found out I was pregnant. So that was a crazy day, but now I'm in medical school and I'm a mom. So, you know, your journeys are just not a straight path, but good luck, everyone.
That's so helpful, Chelsea. Juan Garcia previously in the chat asked about the effect of having a double major or a major minor on your application. We talked about that it's not necessary at the University of Calgary, but maybe you can just comment on why you chose to do a major minor kind of combination.
Okay, so you mean like, why did I choose to like major in psych rather than doing like a major psych, major in bio kind of thing?
Yeah, how did you come to that decision?
I actually didn't even consider doing a double major at the time. I don't know, it just worked out. That's what I was interested in. And as I went along, I decided that I wanted to do physio. So yeah, like I don't really have a very concrete answer. It just worked out.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer in the sense of like it's an answer about following your interest, right? And I like organic chemistry. I really enjoyed organic chemistry as an undergrad student. I know that now some people put a little check mark and think I'm weird, but I really did like it. And I'll tell you, it's a lot easier to do well at something that you really like and you're really enjoying than it is to push yourself into something because it's what you think you need to do or where you need to be, and then try to excel in it. So I think that your path shows that a little bit in terms of doing things that are a good fit for you, and even though the path can be circuitous, it gets you where you need to be. So thank you so much, Chelsea. May I have the next slide, please? So next up is Zachery. Zachery is also a medical student here at the University of Calgary. Welcome, Zach.
Hi, thank you so much. It's great to talk to all of you. I think back to when I was at your stage, and it's just really exciting to think of all the potential that you have and all the options that are open to you guys. Like has been previously mentioned, when I was in high school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do either. I think my mom always envisioned me being a doctor, but at that time, I definitely didn't know for sure what I wanted to do. I grew up in a tiny little town called Spring Coulee, Alberta, south of Lethbridge. And the one thing I knew I loved to do was farm. Unfortunately, my parents didn't own a farm, but I grew up out in the country working on farms all my growing up years. And I loved agriculture. And so that was kind of what I was thinking at the time. After high school, I did one semester of university at the University of Lethbridge and just did some general courses. And then after that, I had the opportunity to go on a 2-year mission for my church. And so I did that for a couple of years down in Arizona. And I learned a lot and got to know a lot of amazing people down in Arizona, but I still didn't really figure out exactly what it was that I wanted to do with my life. And when I came home, I kind of defaulted to, I worked with my dad for a while. He was a funeral director and embalmer in Cardston, Alberta. And so I actually worked there for 1.5 years. And got to know the funeral business a little bit. And I seriously considered making that a career for a while. But eventually I decided to move on, and I went back to university at the U of L. And at that point, I kind of had 2 ideas in my head. One, I loved agriculture. I was interested in agronomy, agrology, that sort of field. And I also had this kind of thing in the back of my mind of medical school as well. And so I had a friend at the time that I was getting started back at university who suggested that I could actually do agriculture as an undergrad and use it to get into medical school if I wanted to. And that seemed to work out really well, or it seemed to be like a good plan, because a lot of the courses that I needed to prepare for the MCAT and to get me on a solid sort of science background or science foundation also applied to my agriculture degree. So I took agricultural biotechnology as my undergrad, my Bachelor of Science at the U of L. And that gave me kind of a parallel plan to, if I wanted to, I could do agronomy or agrology. And so I did some work experience in that field, and I enjoyed it. I still love agriculture, but I actually had an experience during the time I was in my undergrad where I had a family member who was seriously ill for a significant amount of time, and it involved me being in the hospital for a long time with them. And so I really got an exposure to medicine up close and personal that, while it was a difficult experience, it also really kind of lit the fire in me. I became really passionate about medicine. And that experience really solidified my desire to go into medicine as a career. And so from then on, it was more of my agriculture degree was more of a means to an end to me rather than like a parallel plan per se. And so I really got focused and really, really passionate about getting into medical school. And so in my last year, because of that family health challenge, I wasn't able to take the MCAT as soon as I wanted to, but I studied up for the MCAT in my last year of my undergrad. And unfortunately, I did well enough to apply the first time that I took it. And I thought, I would apply to the U of A and UofC and see what happened. It was kind of a trial run for me. I didn't really expect much from it. I just wanted to get used to the applications process and the interview process. And lo and behold, I got interviews, and very fortunately was later accepted to the University of Calgary. And so that was an incredible thing for me. I would just say, to speak to, there's this question here, talking about things to do, what should we avoid? And for me, it was because I had this kind of long and zigzagging path towards medicine. For me, I think one thing that I did avoid, thank goodness, and that I would recommend to everyone else is that I didn't approach medical school necessarily as, I was trying to be the ideal candidate for medical school. I was trying to be the ideal version of myself. And that would be my advice, if I had any, for any of you who are considering medicine as a career. Work on being the most well-rounded, empathetic, service-minded version of who you are, and do what you love and become the best version of you. And if it's kind of meant to be, or if medicine's for you, then that is what will make you the best candidate for medical school, rather than trying to change who you are so that you can fit what you think is the mold of a medical student. So that would be my advice of things to avoid. Avoid, just be genuine. That would be my ultimate advice. Be genuine, be who you are, stay true to who you are. And that's a great preparation for medical school. So yeah, I think that's pretty much about me, and I think I'll leave it there.
Zach, that's great advice for life. Never mind for medical school. I think that's a way to really kind of become the best you can be. I think is really something to aspire to. So I'm grateful you brought that up. Thank you for saying that. Next up is Dr. Reid Hosford. I've known Reid since he was a resident. He's early in his career as a physician, and he works as both a family physician and a family physician anesthesiologist. So he has quite an interesting, varied job. He's always been interested in rural medicine, which is how we started off by crossing paths. I'm really pleased he's here on the call tonight. He's someone I always like to hear from. I'll pass it over to Reid.
All right, thanks, Aaron, and hello, everyone. So yeah, my name is Reid. I am a doctor currently living in Canmore. I thought I could give a little bit of a perspective about what it's like after you've finished medical school and residency. I'm fairly early in my career, and just kind of highlighting some of the different opportunities that I've had both through medical school, residency, and now since practicing. I do remember attending as a high school student an event similar to this in Edmonton, and just to kind of, I guess, advance on what everything else is that's been said by the other medical students here. The one thing that I took away from that is to do something in my undergraduate degree that I was passionate in. Unfortunately, I didn't really know what I was passionate in when I started university, so I kind of meandered through, and I think that that's something that a lot of people do when they're going into university, trying to find what they're interested in, because there's so many different opportunities in most universities as far as courses and degrees. It can be quite overwhelming. So I actually started engineering, thought that wasn't really for me, went into science, was interested in science, but wasn't really sure that a degree in science was what I wanted to do, and then stumbled across some business courses in corporate finance and loved it. And so that's what I pursued, and I did a degree in corporate finance. And then worked actually for a few years doing investment banking. That whole time when I was starting my career, I kind of reflecting on what I wanted to do at the outset, and realizing that I think medicine was what I wanted to do, and applied and was lucky enough to get in. And so I think if you don't know exactly what you're passionate in yet, there's going to be lots of opportunities once you start university, and you'll be able to find something and then just give all of your dedication to that. And I think that's going to show through with every sort of application. Once I was in the University of Calgary, like what Dr. Johnston was mentioning, they have a lot of rural opportunities. And so I grew up in Edmonton. I worked a bit on a farm in the summers, but did not come from a rural background. But I was fortunate enough to get into the longitudinal clerkship program and spent the third year of medical school in Pincher Creek, where I had the opportunity to be fully immersed in a small rural community and get to see what all the rural family doctors did on a day-to-day basis. And I loved it. And that resulted in me applying to do a rural family medicine residency. And so then I spent 2 years in and around the Southern Alberta area doing family medicine training. And then I realized I liked anesthesia as well, and you have opportunities to do anesthesia, which is putting patients to sleep for surgeries, and also helping moms when they're delivering, doing epidurals, and helping with pain management. I thought that was really interesting and something that is often very valuable to small communities. So I did extra training in that, again, through the University of Calgary. And I graduated from that about 3 years ago. I then moved to Pincher Creek and worked there for a couple of years, and a lot of years from rural backgrounds. And so I've probably been in clinics or hospitals in rural areas, but you kind of, the family doctors there and the rural doctors there do a little bit of everything. And that's something that really appealed to me. You would get to work in the emergency departments, and you would get to deliver babies and admit your patients to the hospital and follow them in hospital, and then do clinic and work in the emergency department, seeing everything from stubbed toes to accidental gunshot wounds. And you get to see all those sorts of things. And so no 2 days are the same, and there you continually are learning every day, and you have a lot of usually support from your other colleagues that really really helps make every day very interesting. The other thing that's I think great from any medicine perspective, but rural family medicine as well, is that you're learning every day, and you get to attend conferences, and you're never stagnant. You always feel like there's more to learn and more to do. And then there's lots of opportunities to move and live in different communities. Most communities need doctors, and so you have the flexibility to kind of live and work kind of where you choose throughout Canada. For family reasons, we moved to Canmore, and I've been able to work here doing family medicine and anesthesia. And then I'm also starting to do remote medicine. So I fly up to Inuvik about once every 6 weeks for a week. And that's a community about 100 kilometers south of the Arctic Ocean. And so you get to do anesthesia and family medicine and emerge up there. So kind of there's really no limits as to what you can do and where you can work with a medicine degree. And so, you know, if it's something you're passionate in, I encourage all of you to apply. And I think it's great that we have so many participants here today, because we need energetic, enthusiastic people that want to continue pursuing medicine and learning medicine and helping patients in cities and in rural communities. So thanks a lot, everyone, for attending.
Thanks so much, Reid. That was very helpful, and thanks for walking us. You're a little bit further out in your journey than the medical student, so I think that gives some perspective on that whole journey as well. So thank you very much for that. May I have the next slide, please? Catherine Sutherland is also one of our medical students here at the University of Calgary. She's our last medical student to speak tonight. I'm going to pass it over to you, Catherine.
Hi guys, it's so lovely to see so many of you here. And I also love hearing the stories from our other colleagues, because I swear every time I hear these stories, I learn something new, and they're always so interesting. So I'm going to start from the very beginning, just like the rest of my colleagues did. I grew up an hour west of Edmonton, about Evansburg-Entwistle area. It's about a town of 700 people. And I grew up, my parents ran a contracting company, contracting out welders and millwrights to mines. And I played a lot of basketball in my youth, and worked for my parents' company all throughout junior high. And in high school, my parents moved me into a bigger town in Spruce Grove, where I was playing basketball in the hopes of getting recruited for a university basketball team. And didn't really know what I wanted to do, similar to everyone else, just trying to figure out what I wanted to do as I became an adult. And I knew I really loved sciences. Biology was always my favorite, but I really didn't know what I wanted to do besides playing basketball. And so I kind of went into post-secondary with the thought that I would take a sciences degree, and knew that there was things like physiotherapy or nursing or something at the end of the line that I could apply to after I was done playing basketball. But at the moment, basketball was the thing on my mind. And so I went to MacEwan University, and I did 3 years of an undergrad there in biology and psychology. And I was playing basketball for the full 3 years. And then I kind of thought, like, you know, during that time, I wasn't really like loving what I was doing. And I knew I wanted to do something where I was involved in people's lives and trying to find meaning in things and taking care of people. And so I thought medicine was maybe the thing I wanted to do. And so I wrote the MCAT. I wrote it after my second year of university. And I think that was one of the questions in the chat about when the good time to write it is. I thought that I would write it after my second year, so that if it didn't go so well, I could write it again the next summer. And I applied that. So I did my second year, wrote the MCAT, and then I did my third year. So I applied to get in for the next go round. And so I got in after my third year of university, and now I'm at the University of Calgary. Some other things that I did during my undergrad is I had a family member attempt to commit suicide, and something that sparked in me is something I didn't know a lot about mental health, and that was an area I wanted to know a lot more about and just be more comfortable with it because of my family experience. And so that prompted me to do some volunteering in mental health and addictions on an inpatient ward at the Royal Alex Hospital in Edmonton. And I did some other volunteering with like the Big Brothers Big Sisters organization through our basketball team, mentoring youth. Yeah, and so I think that was another question in the chat, is how did we choose what voluntary experiences we wanted to do? And I really tried to pick experiences that were close to home and that meant something to me. Just because, you know, life gets busy and, you know, it's a long journey to get into medical school and doing other things like university. And, you know, it's hard to continue with those things when you're tired if they don't mean something to you. I think it can really becomes apparent when people are doing things just to look good on paper. And, you know, having that connection to what you're doing is important. Yeah, I think that's it. And the last question, there was one other question in the chat about what we did to get through like financially post-secondary school, and in between like basketball, which I got scholarships for, and just post-secondary, I did waitressing at some golf courses and sports bars, and also did a bunch of contracting work with my parents out at mines, doing some laboring work. So yeah, that's the end of my story.
Thanks for that, Catherine. Next slide, please. So now we'll move on to the question and answer, and thanks to everybody who's so far put questions into the chat. If you have questions, please feel free to put them into the chat. We're going to have at least 15 minutes for questions and answers here. If you're feeling very brave and you want to ask a question live, put up your hand by clicking on reactions and choosing raise hand, and I'll call on you to unmute your mic and ask your question live. Only for the bravest among us. There's a lot of questions here, and I'm going to try to group them together a little bit. There's one question, maybe I'll field first, is someone asked a great question about timelines. How long does this all take? And we're talking about something that's, this is a long-term thing, becoming a doctor. After high school, you do a undergraduate study, which typically is an undergraduate degree, which is 4 years of university. Some people then go on to do either work, spend a time doing work, or spend a time doing a graduate degree, like a master's degree or a PhD degree, or a professional degree. And then comes medical school. Medical school is 3 years at the University of Calgary, but 4 years at many other medical schools. And so that's another 3 to 4 years of training. At the end of medical school, you're awarded an MD degree, which means that you're a doctor, but you're not licensed at that point to practice independently. And you have to do what's called a residency, which is further training that happens, much of it on the job. That training takes from 2 years in family medicine to up to 5 to 6 years in other disciplines. Someone asked about being an anesthesiologist, and that's a 5-year residency. After residency is complete, you are eligible to work as an independent doctor, but many people actually do some further training at that point, something called a fellowship, where they go and get some really in-depth experience in one very specialized area before they go out into practice. So it's a long road. You have to like learning and like education. And the exciting part is that if you like education and you like learning, it doesn't stop. So once you're a doctor, things change fast, and you always have to learn on the job. So that's the first question. I see someone with their hand up, Nora. Nora, do you want to ask a question? Do you want to unmute and ask a question live?
Yeah, sure. So I was thinking a lot about like the undergraduates I would look into for applying to medicine, right? And, you know, I could go with something like a music degree because I'm really passionate about music. I play 3 instruments and I love all 3. But I also thought nursing might be a good route to go too, because I've always liked the idea of patient care, but I do want to be in a more of a leadership position, which is why I thought medical school might be the route for me. So I was thinking, you know, with nursing, I might be able to develop a good attitude with patients, maybe? That's maybe not the right word, but also I was thinking it might help with like the MCAT and stuff, with studying and just preparation, general knowledge about, medicine.
Yeah, that's a great question. It certainly is a degree that would give you a flavor for patient care and help you to determine if that's the career route for you into medicine. Like Dr. Panaccione said at the beginning, getting into medical school is really hard. And so we don't want to make light of this. A lot of people do undergraduate degrees that have an off-ramp that lead to a job that will give them life and career satisfaction and a good income, even if they don't end up going to medical school. And so I think that's sometimes a consideration for some people. We recognize there's a balance of follow your passion and be practical that we have to meet. Thanks for being brave and putting up your hand.
Do you want to maybe answer?
Yeah, go ahead, Chelsea.
Because I think I had a lot of the same questions as Nora when I was trying to decide, because like I started in nursing as well. Just like one thing to think about, a nursing degree is really difficult. Like you have to work really hard. So a lot of my friends, like they work their butts off to get really good grades as well. And I think you have to really enjoy the job. So maybe if you could talk to some nurses or maybe shadow, that would be great too. But for me, even just that year of nursing was so invaluable to just kind of learn how to interact with people. I don't think it helped any with MCAT prep, but I think the work experience was, amazing.
That's great. Thanks, Chelsea. There's a few people have asked questions about the MCAT, and I think that's sort of a proximal point that some people can see in their near future here. How did you study? What did you wish you had known before you wrote the MCAT about studying? What kind of grades or what kind of scores did you need to achieve on the MCAT? Maybe we can give this back to some of the students to hear their perspectives on the MCAT.
Sure.
Sorry. The MCAT, someone just asked in the chat, the MCAT stands for the Medical College Admissions Test. It's a standardized test that's written prior to medical school. I think, Catherine, were you in the process of answering that one, or?
That was me. I can just take a little stab at the MCAT. So for me, I didn't actually do there's several MCAT prep courses that you can take through various organizations. I didn't actually do that. I had a couple of books that were given to me by people that had previously gone through the process. And I also relied on the Khan Academy lectures on YouTube. There's a whole section on the MCAT that they have hundreds of videos for every section of the MCAT, and they're very helpful and they're free, which is nice. And so I relied heavily on those for my MCAT prep, and that seemed to do the trick for me.
Any other hints or tips for people who are closer than me to the MCAT?
Yeah, I can take a stab at it. So I took a whole summer to study for it. So I think I took 2 or 3 months to study for it. And similar to Zach, I bought books off of somebody who had previously taken the test in close proximity to me because the books are expensive. And I didn't take a course because for the exact reason that they're really expensive to take. And I had taken a lot of the courses through my undergrad already. And a lot of the material that's covered on the MCAT is like intro courses for a lot of that stuff. So if you're in your first couple years of university, it's kind of a good time to take it just because you've taken it previously. So yeah, I would recommend buying the books off of someone else, like Facebook Marketplace or Kijiji, looking for things like that, talking to somebody else who's already done it too, because sometimes they make study materials for that. But I would really recommend, like in my case, I regretted not taking organic chemistry and other chemistry courses through the university because it's really hard to motivate yourself to learn that stuff on your own. And if I'm going to be completely honest with you guys, I definitely guessed through the whole organic chemistry section because I just couldn't teach it to myself. So be kind to yourself. It's a hard process. Like find a buddy to try and do it with you to stay motivated. But I would recommend trying to take them in person or like listening to Khan Academy videos because it's hard to teach yourself. But yeah, Chelsea, do you have anything to say about that?
I was going to say, I'm going to give some practical advice before Chelsea sort of weighs in here. So one of the things, again, is that a lot of people, a lot of individual students, and I'm going to speak for the University of Calgary, are worried about the MCAT. Remember, it's only 10% of your total file review score here, but it is different at other schools. So again, the trend across the country, though, is to devalue the MCAT, making it, especially in Western Canada, is that it's counting less and less to your total file review score. And even some more prestigious universities in the United States, for example, Stanford, are getting rid of the MCAT because there's this thought of it being a barrier for all of the reasons that Catherine says is, if you can take a summer off and take a course and write it 5 times, right, that's probably sort of gives you an advantage over somebody who, has to work all summer and can't take a course, etc. So just keep your eye on that space. The organic chemistry, and again, this is more of a strategic tip now, and I usually don't give strategic tips, but organic chemistry is something that always comes up. So it's this love-hate thing. It's like no one wants to take it because if you're not good at it, it just tanks your GPA. On the other hand, if you take it because there is organic chemistry on the MCAT, it'll increase your total, like that one section. If you're in that boat, like, should I take it? Should I not take it? I'm worrying it's going to hurt my GPA. When we look at your GPA, we only look from September to April. So if I was in the position right now, I would take organic chemistry in the summer. So at least I get the principles, but it wouldn't kill my GPA. So just a little tidbit. Catherine's laughing.
I love organic chemistry. Feel like it's getting a little bit of hate here, but this is good advice. This is wise advice. A couple of other questions in the chat. An orthopedic surgery residency is 5 years after medical school, and in the case of orthopedic surgery, most surgeons go on to do a fellowship of 1 to 2 years after that before they enter practice. So you're talking about undergraduate, 3 to 4 years of medical school, 5 years of residency, and 1 to 2 years of fellowship. High school grades, a couple of questions have asked about that. High school grades count for getting into your undergraduate degree, but I don't believe there's any medical schools that are assessing high school grades as part of the application process to medical school. There's a couple of, actually Nicole has her hand up, and I've got a weak spot for people who are brave enough to speak up. So Nicole, if you want to unmute and ask your question.
This question is kind of more like for Catherine, because she did say she was a student athlete and she kind of worked through university as well. And I was just wondering how hard or easy it was to manage her time and do her studies while being a student athlete.
That's a great question, Nicole, and I think it ties into some other questions. So we'll give it to Catherine first, but it ties into some other questions as well about medical school sounds really busy, and getting to medical school sounds really busy. And how do you keep yourself in a good position in terms of wellness and mental health through this process? So I'll turn it over to Catherine, and then I think let's turn it over to the other medical students for that answer as well.
That's a great question. It's always really busy, and I think that's something like to keep in mind if you're thinking about whether you want this, like if you want to pursue the life in it, because it does take a lot of time and a lot of energy. And I think like university, playing post-secondary sports also took a lot of time, and it takes a lot of planning. But I would say that if you're somebody who can work really hard at, making calendars and alerts for yourself, you'll get through it. As far as taking care of yourself, I think it's also important to schedule in self-care time. I think that the culture of grinding 24/7 and working hard all the time is kind of toxic for people. And I like to see the shift in medicine towards people taking care of themselves and taking personal time. But that's something I would really recommend as you're going into your undergrad, is set boundaries. things that you're not willing to do. And sometimes that might mean that school might suffer a little bit, or other areas of your life you might not be as successful in, but it's never more important than your mental health. So that's what I would recommend. Setting boundaries so it doesn't take over your life. And I like to exercise. That's harder with the COVID situation and gyms closing, but like pick a couple hobbies you want to maintain and keep boundaries. Boundaries are important.
Yeah, I second what you said, Catherine. I'm not a student athlete by any means, and I never was. But with anything in life, like honestly, I studied so much in undergrad, like it was unhealthy. And Catherine's right, you have to take the time to go and do things you love to do. So actually now being a mother in medical school, it's really good because I have to step away to take care of someone else, and then at the same time, take care of myself. So yeah, I second those tips, Catherine.
I think for me, one of the things when I was in high school that sort of made me afraid of medicine was how long it takes and how hard it would be. And that's a real thing. Medical students, doctors are people too. We have the same needs as everyone else. And like has been mentioned, it's really important to take some time for yourself and for your family and the things that you love. Perfection is an illusion, and there's way more of medicine than there is of you. You're very finite, and I've really learned that over the last couple of years. But you get through it, and it's doable, and you can do it. That's what I would say.
Those are great answers. There's lots of questions there about what kind of volunteer work counts. And I think it actually touches on something that was threaded through that wellness there too. And we can bring it back to the application for the University of Calgary, which asks about these Big Ten life experiences. And it gets at the point that you want people, we're not looking for unidimensional people who are amazing at being a student and don't have any other experiences in their life. So it's important to cultivate those other experiences. And where those experiences offer the opportunity to build connections with other people, or to bring meaning into the world, or to bring meaning into your own life, I think those are the experiences that count. And so it's an answer where the answer comes from you. If there's a volunteer opportunity that connects with you in that way, then it's meaningful and it counts. If you're doing it just to get a tick box and say you did volunteer work, then often that is actually it comes through in terms of how people talk about it or the connections they build in those opportunities.
Just to build on that, it's really, really important from our admissions process. So we talk about this all the time. I blog about this, is that, again, I loved Zach's answer is be true to yourself, be passionate, do what makes you happy, and don't tick boxes. So every year we get applicants, for example, who, we have this sort of joke within the office that we say, if you're sitting and you're listening to two people who want to get into medical school who really don't know how to get into medical school, this is what they'll tell you. They'll say, you know what, volunteer, start a club on campus, do summer research, right? And get high grades, right? And so those are the things. And so but we see applications like that all the time. And it's like it's like one summer of research just to say, oh, I did research. I started a club on campus. I volunteered for the Red Cross or the hospital, or, and we see that all the time. And you can really tell the applicants who are really just doing things to try to get into medical school because they see that list we provide versus, individuals who really have a passion, be it what Catherine said about, volunteering in mental health because of a personal experience, because that comes out loud and clear is your connection to your life experience when you write those top 10 experiences. And so again, do things that you're passionate about and that you love, and that'll translate into a great application, show that you're a diverse person with a variety of interests. You know, every year, like we're sending out interviews on Thursday. Every year, everyone says, well, but I had a 3.9 GPA. I scored 528 on the MCAT. I volunteered for a year in the hospital. Then I went to the Red Cross, right? And I started, you know, the Friends of Barney club on campus. Why didn't I get in? Is because you did all of that for like 3 months at a time. There's no longitudinality into that. So just think about that as you're sort of going through this journey. And the other beautiful thing here is, and you know, for all the medical students, I loved that you shared your journey, because they're so diverse, and it really highlighted that it's not a point A to point B. I don't think I heard any point A to point B. And so don't be afraid to make mistakes and change your course, because sometimes it's that longer journey that gives you an appreciation of the final destination.
Advice, Remo. Taylor's hand's raised. Taylor, the last question of the evening is going to be yours. I'll ask you to unmute and ask your question.
Perfect. Well, I feel very honored that it's the last question, but my question's mainly for Chelsea and just for all of the medical students in general. Did you feel that it took up a majority of your time? I know people say that, like, when you go into medical school, it's going to be your life. And I know that I also want to have a family. And I was wondering, as like Chelsea, as a mother, did you feel that it took up a majority of your time and it was just hard to balance? Or did you all find that it was a good balance of work and home and still having time for yourself and just the balance of it?
Yeah, so I think for everybody, the answer is going to be different. But for me, I'm kind of in a unique situation because now with COVID, school is actually online. And my husband, he actually stays home. And he's not working right now, and he's able to take care of our babies. So I have really good social support. So right now, I am only my first year, so things could change when it gets to like clerkship and actually working in the hospital. But right now, I feel like I have time to adequately study, to like spend quality time with my family, and then also take time for me. But that, I think like a lot of that is just like I have more control over my schedule, so I don't have to commute to and from the school. But like that was one of my concerns before I applied to medical school, was like school taking up a lot of time. So right now it's doable, but there again, like it's going to be different for everyone, and I'm not sure what it's going to look like when it comes to clerkship and residency. But I think the key, and this is really cheesy, but it's so true, is your social support system and having people who are going to help you. So if having a family is one of your life goals and it's something you value, you can absolutely do that in medicine. I think you could do it in medical school. And I don't think that should be something that stops you from pursuing it if you really want to be a doctor. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
That's a good answer, Chelsea. I always think of balance when I talk to the medical students and residents. Balance isn't a place that you live in. It's a tightrope that you walk on, and it changes. Some days your balance is really good, and some days you feel like you're about to fall off the tightrope. And in medical school and residency, the other piece of it is that balance is a skill, and you won't always have it right, but you want to develop it as a skill domain for yourself, because it's something that doesn't end with the end of medical training. It's something that extends into your practice. And so I always encourage people to think of it as a skill they're developing, not something that they have or do not have. So that takes us to the end of the evening. We're going to send out the slide deck to everybody. Catherine's kindly put her email in the chat in case people have some follow-up questions they want to ask to her. Thank you for doing that, Catherine. I want to give a big thank you tonight to a few people. I want to, first of all, thank the technical team behind this, especially my team at the DLRI office who's made the webinar go off. They've done a lot of behind-the-scenes work that's made this really a successful night, I think. So a big thank you to them. I want to thank Dr. Panaccione for coming. I want to thank Dr. Hosford for coming, and I want to thank our 3 medical students as well for coming. I think having you here was critical to the success of the evening, and I want to thank our partner organization, our HPAP, who's been trying to reach out to high schools for a long time. And with the pandemic, we talked together, and I think this really opened up an opportunity for us to do something different. And I hope this was exciting for you. Please fill out the surveys that RPAP is going to send to you. They are going to do a draw for a $50 gift card for people who complete the survey. And those surveys will not only help us to know about tonight, but they'll help us to make this a better event in the future as we repeat this. I want to thank everyone for coming, especially the biggest thank you here is to the high school teachers and the high school guidance counselors who are in the audience tonight, who are taking the time to inspire their students to come out to an event like this. And to you, the students themselves, it's really important that you're here. We don't get a lot of opportunity to connect with you, and I think we're excited about it. I hope you felt that tonight, that we're really happy that you're here and you're considering medicine as a career path in the future. And with that, I'm gonna say thank you to everyone, and I'm gonna end the evening. So thank you very much.